How, as a coach or parent, do you get your athletes to use what they know in wrestling as far as drill time into their live wrestling and then into their matches? Two parts here. Number one, a lot of what they know they're not going to use ever, or rare occasion. So what I mean is, if you watch Jordan Burroughs, who's an Olympic champion, he doesn't use an inside trip. You watch Dayton Fix, he does use an inside trip. You watch David Taylor, I don't ever see him using a fireman's carry, but I'm sure he knows it, right? So their wrestling styles just lead down pathways that generally in those pathways, there's a few other techniques that they focus on without probably even trying. It's kind of like just let your instincts take over them. You want your athletes to get into a flow. I tell my athletes, always let your instincts take over. Your instincts will very seldomly steer you wrong, and if they do, it probably wasn't your instinct. It was probably will show your technique flaws. So, just as you look at any great high school wrestler, some of them will use positions more or techniques more than others because their wrestling style and their athleticism and their body style and their body type causes them to filter to these certain positions, right? So, if you look at some NCAA champions who score a lot of an underhook, and you know a lot from an underhook, but you don't wrestle an underhook in a match because you're crazy fast and you like to be forehead to forehead with your left hand stab, you're not going to use a lot of scoring tactics from your underhook. Sure, you would drill some in live wrestling or in practice. You probably have an inside trip from there, throw by, maybe a snap down to a front headlock. There's plenty of NCAA champions that win NCAA titles and a lot of matches from an underhook position, and your coach says, you don't ever use your inside trip from an underhook. You're not doing good. And then you cause these kids to stress out. Well, no, he's got he's got a great near arm far leg, right? He might win his state titles and maybe one day a college national title with a near arm far leg. He's so fast. Maybe he has a lot of length. He likes to keep his opponents out here. The short muscle guy likes to be inside tight. So don't stress your kids out and by always pointing out what they're not doing. I think so much we do. Wrestling is such a stressful sport as a parent and a coach. We're always trying to figure it out. Why don't we just leave them alone and say, go score points? And they will, right? Now, the second part of this is very simple. They do need to use their techniques in matches. It will slowly get into it. So, do you have a 17-year-old who's wrestled 12 years, who's had world-class training and wrestles year-round? Yeah, you might be able to pinpoint the positions they're in a lot and say, from your underhook, which you're in a lot, you're not hitting your inside trip enough. Okay, coach, that makes sense. Let me develop some more options from here. But if you have an 8-year-old who can't even do a drop step without falling over, and you're like, you're not hitting your near on far leg or fireman's carry enough, you're kind of screwing their head up. So we like to say this: trust your instincts. Do a lot of so we have wrestling has 2,000 about over 3,000 wrestling moves, right? You can just look around the internet; they're out there. Most of your points, we say 90% of our points comes from 10% of the wrestling. We focus right there in our certain camps, and then our 14-day camps, we get bigger, and then our 28-day challenge camp, we get bigger. We branch out, but we're never hitting everything in wrestling because, drilling a counter to a counter to a counter to a Russian 2-on-1 might be a waste of your time when, you don't even have a post-high crotch yet. So as an athlete or as a coach, you should be focusing on the core wrestling system and the core techniques of wrestling. And then just let the kids wrestle live and let their wrestling evolve. Sure, you step in, but you don't want to panic them, all right? Now, building on the second part of this, once they're drilling something and they are learning, then they drill it, they're getting high reps because they already know it, push, circle, pull, fireman's carry, whatever. They're snapping, right? Kid's 11 years old, he's hit a couple thousand of them, he hits some in practice on occasion, it might be his main technique, that's good, he hit it all the time, because I'm sure David Taylor hits a fireman's carry in practice on occasion, right? Then what you do is you have their partner resist a little bit during live wrestling. Sure, some positions you can start in situations and make them wrestle from there, and that's always a good thing. We all know that as a coach. But, we call it combative drilling, and it's very hard to do with the lower skill, lower experience level wrestlers, whether they're in high school or middle school or kids wrestling. But, so situations is good, but sometimes you can't you can't do a situation, certain takedown positions, right? But what you'll do is you'll say, okay, you're drilling, and your partner's going to resist 75%. So now there's a struggle. So it's not all out live. So I'm not drilling on a dummy and then trying to hit it against a live competition in practice. I'm drilling against semi-live competition. So if you have an athlete who, obviously a 9-year-old or a first year 14-year-old does have to be able to hit a double leg, right? So in that case, they do need to use the moves that they know, but they're not hitting in matches. Now you can start to merge the live wrestling with the drilling a little bit through a combative drilling scenario, and you're going to find that these techniques will start to leak their way into their live wrestling more. But it does take time. So don't stress out the kids, all right? Understand who you're dealing with. Are you dealing with some kids don't end up in these positions all the time, just like Jordan Burroughs doesn't wrestle in an ear-to-ear collar tie with underhook. He doesn't, right? It would be stupid for him to. So they're wrestling, the very advanced kids their wrestling will steer towards different pathways, and down their pathways will be the list of techniques they focus on just naturally. We don't want to interrupt that. The beginner kids, they do need to focus on the core techniques of wrestling, and they do need to use those on live wrestling. And that's pretty much the two scenarios you're looking at, and when to intervene and when not to. Good luck. You can check us out at purlerwrestling.com. Good luck to everyone.